Hi, I'm Warren Sprouse. I'm your host and your guide on the Bible Forum, which meets every Sunday evening from 8 until 10 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, right here on our website, thebibleforum.net. We'd love for you to join us. Send me an email. Email me at thebibleforum@gmail.com, and I'll put you on our mailing list so that every week you'll get an email that tells you what the topics are, reminds you that we're going to be doing this. I wanted to talk to you about the New Apostolic Reformation, Chuck Pierce, the prophet, and Glenn Beck, the Mormon. Peter Wagner, C. Peter Wagner, is the grand poobah of the New Apostolic Reformation. He is mentor of guys by the name of Rick Warren and several others. He was instrumental, along with another fellow, in getting the church started that is referred to as the Toronto Vineyard. This was an outfit in Canada, in Toronto, where eventually they were laughing like hyenas. They were rolling around on the floor. At one point, they had people stuck to the floor. Nobody could pick them up. They had all sorts of supernatural phenomena that took place, and each one of them, they had a laughing revival. The fellow would walk around and laugh in people's face, and they would fall down. But all of this was a manifestation of the Spirit of God. No, it wasn't. Anyway, he has put together an organization, New Apostolic Reformation, and in this organization, he's the head prophet, but there are a number of prophets, and one of them is named Chuck Pierce. In this organization is a fellow by the name of Bill Redding. I've mentioned him on occasion. He's out in California. There's a fellow by the name of Mike Bickle, Kansas City Prophets, IHOP, International House of Prayer, a proponent of contemplative prayer. A bunch of these different kinds of people in this organization. But the focus here is on Chuck Pierce, who is, for all intents and purposes, accepted in the organization as a prophet. And he presented a mantle to Glenn Beck. Now, if you accept that Chuck Pierce is a prophet, you understood that he was conferring some type of prophetic status upon Glenn Beck. Now, if people are in the room and they're Christians, they'd have a problem with that. If Chuck Pierce were a Christian, he'd have a problem with that. Because Glenn Beck is not a Christian. How do you confer a mantle, a Christian mantle, on a man who's not a Christian? He's a Mormon, and he makes no bones about it. Now, there are some folks who believe that Glenn is on his way to being a Christian, that he talks about this stuff, and they think that he's really kind of on the cusp. He's going to do that. And if you listen to his show, he'll tell you he's a Christian. Now, Mormons didn't do that 50 years ago. They've only done that recently. There was a decision made that they were going to present themselves as Christians, and they started doing it. Glenn Beck wasn't around for that. And he somehow has fallen into this sort of thing, and he actually believes that he's a Christian, which means he has no clue as to what a Christian really is. Walter Martin, who's gone now, he's with the Lord. He was founder of an organization called the Christian Research Institute, and he did a lot of work in the area of cults. And he says a cult, talking about Mormonism, that it is a cult because it follows every outline structure of cultism, its own revelations, its own gurus, and its denial systematically of all sound, systematic Christian theology. He says it's a cult because it passes its leadership on to the next group that takes over, either modifying, expanding, or contracting the same heresies, dressing them up in different language and passing them on. It is theologically corrupt because it is bibliologically corrupt. It denies the authority of Scripture. It ruins its own theology. And it ends in immorality, because the only way you could have gotten to this homosexual, morally relativistic garbage, which is today our denominational structures, is if the leadership of those denominations denied the authority of Scripture and Jesus Christ as Lord. Martin had strong opinions about cults and about the occult. He was talking in that paragraph about liberalism. But he also goes on to talk about Mormonism. And he says that Mormonism fits the description. Some of the New Apostolic Reformation fits in Dr. Martin's definition of a cult. What are we really talking about here? We're talking about people who do not believe in Jehovah God. When you talk to a Mormon like Glenn Beck and he talks about God, he's not talking about the God of the Bible. He's talking about a God on a planet, was it outside of, nearby, some planet nobody had ever heard of before, who lives there with his wives and just continues to have children, spirit children. And that if you're a good Mormon male, you can be righteous enough to reach Godhood, and in the end you'll have your own planet, and you can seed other planets with these spirit children, so that when children are conceived in human bodies, at some point those spirit children enter in and they grow up. You know, Jesus was like that. Jesus started out as a baby, but he was such a great guy. He lived according to the law. He did all the right kinds of things, and he became God. His brother, Satan, had a problem. Mormonism has some serious problems. The idea of the mantle of a prophet is conferring a certain amount of power, authority, responsibility from one to the other. We think of Elijah, Elisha, and the mantle was passed. What is it that Chuck Pierce is giving to Glenn Beck? People who know both of them, both of their organizations, both of them, would agree that they have just identified as being the same. Now, Chuck Pierce will tell you he's a Christian. New Apostolic, this is for Jesus. Glenn is over here saying, I'm a Mormon. I'm a Christian too. It throws a whole different light on the New Apostolic Reformation. Is it really Christian organization or not? I mentioned Rick Warren earlier in the show because he's part of this. And this year, Rwanda is going purpose-driven, the whole country. And Rick Warren is right at the heart of this. He has been in and out of Rwanda and I think Uganda, Kenya, someplace in Africa, and he's been sowing the seeds of the New Apostolic Reformation under his peace plan, PEACE. And the idea is that these nations would adopt those 5 principles, biblical principles, and the nations themselves would become Christ-like. So in August, Rick Warren is going to host a gathering of pastors and church leaders from all 54 African nations in conjunction with a national day of Thanksgiving. The conference is going to be the first of 5 annual continent-wide conferences to take place by 2020, with a second one planned to be in Latin America in 2016. Last year, Rick Warren personally arranged to gather over 100 leaders from 30 African nations, as well as Russia, China, India, and the United States, to tour the nation, Rwanda, and prepare for the 2015 gathering that he calls an All-Africa Purpose-Driven Church Leadership Conference. This is fascinating. This is a so-called Christian pastor in harmony with the New Apostolic Reformation that's conferring mantles of prophetic whatever on Glenn Beck, putting together a program in African nations to set up this millennium. And it just so happens that as this is unfolding, the United Nations has launched a biometric registration process for some 245,000 Rwandan refugees living in the Democratic Republic of Congo. And it just makes you wonder, if you're going to be a conspiracy theorist, it makes you wonder, what's really going on and how's all this working out for you? It doesn't take very much to read the Bible and understand that at some point in the future there will be a numbering system. It's characterized as 666. Nobody knows exactly what that is. My own theory is it's a 3-digit code that's going to be attached to your Social Security number, or to your credit card number, or to your ID, or what, I don't know. But it's going to be a global registration program so that when you go to the ATM, if you don't have that, you're not getting any money. You're not going to be able to buy, you're not going to be able to sell. You have to take the mark of the beast in order to do this. And it always amazes me when people talk about it. You think of yourself, you put yourself in that place. And if this is the way it's going to work, and you have children at home, but you cannot feed them, what is going to be the motivation? You're going to want to take that mark. But you see, under tribulation gospel, if you take the mark, you go to hell. You say, oh, well, it's kind of a catch-22. Yeah, it really is. And I try to imagine what the emotions are and how this is all working out for people in those days. And I just can't picture it. As a father, grandfather, great-grandfather, I cannot picture it. But that's what's going to happen. Now, over on the other side of that, consider that there are Christians in the Middle East who are under tremendous pressure, and in Africa as well, under tremendous pressure from these radicalized Islamic warriors, they call themselves. And they're being persecuted, they're being martyred. We just saw another whole pile marched out in front of the ocean, cut their heads off, shoot them, whatever it was they did. But they're knocking down entire churches with people in them. They're setting them on fire with people in them. They're doing all sorts of things to families and to individuals. And how are these Christians bearing up under all of this? Reports are starting to come out. And the reports are saying that these Christians are proud. They are proud that God has called them to be worthy to suffer this way. That God trusts them this much, that gives them this honor to be martyred. Is that not amazing? Now, some of you might say, well, that's sick. These people are crazy. First, second, third centuries of the church during the tremendous Roman persecution and the Jewish persecution as well. That's exactly what was going on, and that's what people were feeling. They counted an honor to die for Jesus. He died for them. I'll gladly die for you. Is that what's going to happen during the Great Tribulation? Are people, believers, going to say that? You know what? Hey, it's the least I can do. I don't know. But when you get down to the bottom and you don't have anything else, things change. Things change. I don't know where Rick Warren is going with all of this. I don't know where Chuck Pierce is going with all of this. I certainly don't know where Glenn Beck is going. But I can tell you from 50 years of studying the Bible, it's not a Christian idea.